In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Please be seated. Today is Trinity Sunday, the traditional day on the church calendar when preachers dash themselves, often with great futility, against the rocks of the concept of God in three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, one unified being, albeit manifested in three separate forms. This spring, in Wednesday morning Bible study, we dove headfirst into these deep waters. So, this morning's sermon is dedicated to the faithful Wednesday morning Bible study crew who were willing to spend many weeks wrestling with the idea of the Trinity and who explored the ways in which a concept of the Trinity came into being. For the word Trinity is not a word you will find anywhere within the pages of our New Testament. The catalyst for this exploration came from a wondering as to what exactly was happening in the period between the latest book of the New Testament, say early 2nd century CE, and the first great church councils of the 4th and 5th centuries, which set their minds to and did indeed accomplish the codification of so much of what we profess on a weekly basis, right down to this very Sunday. How did they get there? What on earth was happening in the 200 to 300 years in between? The fertile intellectual and spiritual wrestling taking place in those centuries can be summarized in part as an extended conversation or argument in regard to what we celebrate today, the Trinity. Because all of the tricky, practical, and theological issues of those years really came down to one important question, and that was the question of Jesus. Who was or is Jesus? Prophet, Son of God, completely divine, human first, then gifted with the Spirit of God, but then human in his death, pure spirit and never really human at all, some combination of both, but then in what proportion? What fraction was God and what fraction was human? The scriptures of the Old Testament feature God, of course, God the Creator, the Father, the great I am, and the Holy Spirit is there as well. The breath of God we heard about this morning blowing over the earth since the first stirrings over the waters of creation. Both God and Spirit show up in the New Testament. But now we have the addition of Jesus, the Messiah. Those from the Jewish tradition, those who believed Jesus to be the promised and long-awaited Messiah, had a deep need to tie Jesus to the promises and prophecies of the Old Testament, to bind Jesus inextricably to God the Father and to God the Spirit. Meaning that now when we talk about God, we add God the Son, come down to earth in human likeness. But enter another piece of the puzzle. The culture within which the Jews were living and had always lived, the culture of the Assyrians, the Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, and now the Romans, it was a deeply polytheistic culture. There are gods everywhere you turn. Greek converts to this new Christian faith didn't have any trouble with the notion of Jesus as the Son of God. There were human sons of God walking all over. Romans don't have trouble with this concept either. Caesar, upon becoming Caesar of necessity, becomes a god. So that's no big deal. But as a culture, if you have spent a good 1,000 years declaring that there is only one God, the true God, the God above all other false gods, this new argument that what might look like three gods is actually the one God in three forms? Well, to quote one member of Bible study, that's a harder sell. Decades, morphing into centuries, go into this argument. And to say it got heated is an understatement. There is also the small suspicion that those arguing most vehemently and with the greatest passion, those who are spinning ideas and playing with scriptural texts and holding forth in the church councils of the ancient cities of Turkey and Egypt, there is the notion that this is also just fantastic mental play. I don't think these early bishops would ever admit it, but when it came to arguing about the Trinity, they were having a great time. So, after the year 325 in the Council of Nicaea, which the Emperor Constantine had called in order to bring some unified thought to the swirl of belief currently passing for Christianity, a consensus of a kind was reached. Think of it like an agreement that finally passes in Congress. The ones whose point of view won the day were celebrating and declaring their moral superiority. The ones who lost were licking their wounds and declaring the fight not yet over, and that their side was truly on the side of right. And then everyone went home to their separate towns and churches to report back. And the congregations nodded and yawned, and then went right on doing whatever it was they had been doing before. Because the question, as it was for your average Jesus follower in the year 325 or 500 or 652, was much the same as it is for us. What does a concept of the Trinity have to do with me and with my life? What do I do with this if I'm not passionate about theology or philosophy? If I'm just getting through my day with its obligations and don't have the time or inclination to really think through all these words we proclaim in the Nicene Creed, these words which lay out specific arguments about the nature of God and of Jesus and the Holy Spirit. Because mostly I've got to get kids to practice and people I love are sick. I feel alone. I had a fight with my spouse or my children. There is so much to do. My work week is a disaster. Vacation is looming. I have yet to make travel plans. Seriously, what does the Trinity have to do with us? A 4th century theologian and Bishop of Constantinople, Gregory of Nazianzus, wrote extensively describing the varying qualities of God in their separate forms. Ultimately, he came to this summation of the Trinity. When I contemplate the three together, I see but one torch and cannot divide or measure out the undivided light. The Trinity, as ephemeral as light, as constant as light, able to be divided into three separate flames, but when brought together, the experience is of an undivided light. I think this might come closer to the essence of the Trinity than almost anything else. It is complex because we are being asked to wrap our minds around the different natures of something, some being who is eternal, enfolding before us, always there behind us, eternal and so incomprehensible. God surrounding us, within us, God everywhere. What the concept of the Trinity does offer us is the idea of God accessible to us in different ways, providing us a way to interact with God in the manner that best speaks to us right where we are in this very moment. A friend once asked me, when you pray to God, to whom do you pray? Do you pray to Jesus, to the Holy Spirit, to God? Who or what do you picture? I thought about it, and at the moment, when I pictured my regular conversation with God, I had to go with the Holy Spirit. But the thing is, that's not always my answer. It depends on the moment. The core point is this. It doesn't matter to which aspect of God you pray, because no matter what, it's God. And God is with us. God is always with us. From the very beginning, God has been communicating with humanity in different ways, From the moment the Spirit of God first swept across the waters of creation, or the bush where Moses was standing burst into flame, this is what it has to do with us. God here with us, in the mess, in the good, in the person next to you, that flame of Spirit inspiring us and moving us forward, the hands and feet of Jesus feeding the hungry, helping those in need, reaching out to comfort the grieving. God, overwhelming in grandeur and scope, whom we seem to encounter most often in the swath of stars above our heads, in the power of the ocean, in those moments when we sense our smallness in the face of eternity. The way in which we have an experience of God may change, depending on the hour or the day or the time of our life. It may change depending on what we need. But what does not change, what is ever constant, is God there with us in our need. The breath breathing into and for us, the arms wrapped around us, the feet moving to our aid, the God who delights in our delight of the beautiful world and asks that we envision eternity, the life of forever with God. These are ways in which we can experience the essence of God in three manifestations. And yet still, God, our own guiding and undivided light.